That was the car. We were both ejected. I was pronounced clinically dead at the scene, and he suffered minor injuries. And upon death, that energy body cracks open from the top down, and our soul leaves. That's that energy, that breath. I was resurrected. If you fear death, you're not going to truly live. Most of our fears are irrational.
Welcome, everyone, to our sliver of time. Today, we have a very special guest, the author of You Are Deathless, of course, heavily inspired by her near death experience. And I'm going to let her explain her story herself. So, first and foremost, thank you so much, Nicole Kerr, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Dave. I'm delighted and grateful to be on your show and to tell my story and hopefully to inspire and to, um, I guess, help your audience in their healing journeys and their soul's evolution.
What was that situation like? What was kind of the situation you were in that led up to this experience?
Sure. I was only 19 years old. Okay. So this is 41 years ago, actually. And I was a cadet at our United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was one of the first classes of women. And I will tell you, I was there because I was trying to please my father, not because I wanted to be a soldier or fly planes. So that's one of the things I discuss in the book is people pleasing identity. But anyway, I was at the academy and we were starting our my second year there. So I'd gotten through the first year as a basic and now was starting my second year. We had a big squadron kickoff party and I was getting a ride home, and I got a ride home with a senior. And unfortunately, I did not know that he was drunk. And when we were going back, he wanted to stop at a bar. And I said, okay. And I actually had two beers for the first time in my life, smoked a cigarette, and we headed home. Well, home back to the academy. And I will tell you, I grew up in the South in a very conservative family. So fun was not really allowed. And so here I was, I thought, okay, I'm going to go have some fun for once in my life. I'm going to have a couple beers, I'm going to have a cigarette. And then I didn't realize that this memory actually came back a lot later, but this is what caused the actual crash was the driver was making a sexual pass at me and I said no. And he got mad and he turned the wheel. It was a 1965 Corvette convertible. And I don't know if your audience can see that very well, but that was the car. And he was speeding, and the passenger side of the car hit a huge boulder. And needless to say, flipped the car, moved the boulder, and we were both ejected. We did not have seatbelts on. I was pronounced clinically dead at the scene, and he suffered minor injuries. And the reason I now know this is because the EMT that was one of the first responders and that I call one of my angels that resuscitated me came to the hospital room 10 weeks later and told me what the story was. So here's the story. And my memory coming back 19 years later actually confirmed what the story was. When he got to the scene, it was outside of the academy in Monument, and some bystanders had heard the crash and came out, checked me, couldn't get any vitals on me. So they went in and got a blanket and covered me up and called 911. And it took the first responders anywhere from 10 to 13 minutes to get to me. So they estimate that I was clinically dead that length of time. When John got on the scene, the EMT, he couldn't get any vitals either. So the last thing that he did was something called a sternal knuckle press, where they go up your spine with the your sternum with your knuckles. And it's a technique that's designed to elicit pain in the body. And that was the last thing he knew to do. And when he did that, my right eye flinched and the pupil dilated. And at that point, he knew I was still alive. So what he did was put on these mask pants that they had just gotten on the bus, first time to ever use them. They put them on your legs and it forces all the blood up to your organs. And that was one of the things that saved me. And at that point, they started CPR and did CPR for a full 20 minutes, which, Dave, I don't know if you know anything about CPR, but that's a long time to do CPR on somebody. And he was a former Navy SEAL, and his goal was just to keep me alive until I got to the hospital. And I'll tell you one thing interesting about that is you hear that phrase, our eyes are the window to our soul. And it's true because when I died, we all have an energy body. And upon death, that energy body cracks open from the top down, and our soul leaves. That's that energy, that breath that you see on a cold winter's day. That is your life force energy, your chi. That is what goes on, not this vessel. We all know that that physical vessel dies. So when got I went butt up through the windshield, and when I got into the air, I kind of froze, and that's when an angel from the other side came down and took me over to the other side. And I knew when I was in the air that when I hit the ground, I was going to die. I just knew it. And I called out, "Oh my God, please help me." And that's when the angel came and got me. And I will tell you that you do not, a lot of people ask me, "Do you feel pain at death?" And I tell you, no, you do not. And almost, I can guarantee you, almost 99.9% of traumatic, horrific crashes that happen, if the person died, they did not feel the pain of impact. Their spirit leaves them before that pain occurs. So that's what happened to me. My soul went over to the other side, and I'll tell you about what happened later on the other side, but I want to get back to how my soul came back in through my body was through my eye. So that's when the EMT was able to get a blood pressure reading on me of 60 over 0. Now, that's pretty much life and death because normal is 120 over 80, but he had some sign of life that he knew he could keep working me. So they got me in the bus and got me to the nearest community hospital where they immediately sent me into the OR and worked on just stabilizing me. And I was in and out of life and death that whole time. And the next morning around 7:30, they got me stable. So that's a long time to work on somebody. And then I had another near death experience, two of them actually, while I was in the hospital. So I have been to the other side a couple of times. I didn't want to come back, but here I am. And I'm glad I'm back because now I know what my message is and I can get on with getting that message out to people and help to alleviate any fears they may have about death.
So I have a lot of questions around this event and the whole thing. We're going to get into it, but before that, do you mind giving kind of like a description of, when you say you went to the other side, what was this like? Did it look like something? Did it feel like something? Can you kind of take us to that? Like, what was this
Sure.
place?
Okay, so here's the cool thing about this. The body is an amazing mechanism. The only thing that I had remembered, Dave, when I woke up in the ICU the next day was these brilliant, bright white light. And that is the most common symptom characteristic of NDE, near death experiencers, is this bright white light. And I have to tell you, it was so soothing. And so it just felt like I was in this chrysalis wrapped around, and it was a loving presence and an energy that is just undescribable brilliance. And I really felt like I was an astronaut floating in outer space full of awe and wonder. It was amazing, but that's all I remembered. Okay, the rest of it was a total blank. And then 19 years later, now this happens when I'm 19, and then 19 years later, I'm working at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. And I go to Starbucks and I get my regular coffee. And then I get my car to go to work. And I'm like, I can remember exactly how I was sitting in the car. And I started remembering exactly how the wreck happened. So instead of work, I went to my chiropractor and I waited for him to have an opening. And he said what was happening were called repressed memories. And they were now coming up. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 19 years later, this is coming up. How does that even happen? And so I learned a lot about repressed memories and trauma and your body's need for safety and the security to process trauma and the ability to process it. And I also know I believe in angels and spirit guides, and just there's a whole host on the other side that are there and willing and wanting to help us. And they gave me a kick in the butt and said, okay, it's time for you to remember, because you have a mission now, and your mission is to tell people not to be afraid of death, among other things. And it's time that you remembered that and get on with what you're supposed to do in the remaining time you have on this planet. So that memory coming back was the beginning of what I call my spiritual transformative experience with this. And when the memory came back, I remembered what was on the other side. And for that 20 years, Dave, I was in like the wandering land. I didn't know what had happened. I kept searching for God. I kept trying to understand why I was feeling so different from other people, and just lost, I guess would be the word. And so on the other side, I can tell you, I was taken up by this angel who I now know is my grandfather. And you're in, it's like Casper the Friendly Ghost. You're in this translucent, you're not in a physical form, but you're like see-through, and you have the ability with your eyes, like our human eyes can only see forward and maybe a little bit periphery, right? Well, on the other side, your eyes can see 360 and the future all at once. And you have an ability, like I heard angels talking right beside me. I could hear their conversation, but I wasn't in English. It wasn't in the English language. It's through telepathy and through vibration and these other ways that you communicate. But I was somehow able to translate that back to English when I got to this side. And they were saying that they are there, the angels are there to help us, but we have to ask them for help because of something called free will. So I want everybody to know angels are real. They come in many forms, and it's not crazy or stupid or small-minded to say, can you help me find a parking space, angels? Okay. Because they'll come through for you. They really will. So start asking for what it is that you want and start creating a dialogue and a relationship, because we all have at least one guardian angel, at least one. I have a team of 5 angels around me at presently. So, it's important to ask for that help because they are there and we're not here alone. That's another important lesson. We are not alone. The spiritual realm, we just can't see it, but they are there and they can give us signs, but we have to attune ourselves to that. I will also tell you there's music over there that is amazing. The colors, there's more colors than the Sherwood-Williams paint color chips. Okay. There are colors we can't even fathom, but it's beauty beyond words. It really is. It's hard. We all struggle who've been over to the other side. We struggled to put into English words the experience that we had because it was so brilliant and so profound and so utterly amazing. And, here in the United States, I think we are in this death denial. We don't think we're going to die. And we paint the picture that death is doom and gloom and negative and depressing. But I and thousands of others and people you've interviewed are here to tell you that on the other side, heaven, whatever you want to call it, it's absolute beauty, love, loving kindness, and this peace that passes all understanding. And our deceased loved ones are over there. In my book, I said the angel that came and picked me up and took me over was Casper, but it's now my grandfather, and he told me this 2 years ago. After I published the book, he came to me and told me, Nicole, I'm your angel. I saw the abuse that you were going through at the academy. I know you hated it. You couldn't quit. You didn't want to feel the shame and the humiliation of quitting and disappointing all these people that were counting on you. But he said, I am here to be with you and help you and protect you until you pass again. So our deceased loved ones are on the other side, but they're in their true spirit form. They're not in the form they were on earth, Dave. So my grandfather was an alcoholic here while he was on earth, but that doesn't transcend to the other side. You don't see them as what they were on earth if they were abusive or whatever. What's also interesting is the driver of the car was an alcoholic, and I didn't know it. So there's always parallel pathways from the other side and your story or your journey here on earth. So, those are some of the things that I saw. You also come back very different when you've been to the other side. First of all, you're more sensitive, you're more empathetic, you're more sympathetic, you're more conscious. And for me, like, I can't handle toxins. So, smoke, alcohol, unfortunately, I really would love wine. Um, just things like that.
You had your first 2 beers and a cigarette that day, so, I was gonna ask like, "Oh, have you drank since?" Have you literally never drank at all since then?
No, no, I've actually tried to drink and enjoy it, and I can do some. I can handle things like maybe Bailey's Irish Cream, something that's not real strong with the alcohol. But I tend to get migraines when I drink wine, and alcohol just doesn't metabolize well in my system. So it's interesting that both the products that I had right before I died are two products that I can't tolerate today. Uh, that's an interesting comparison. But definitely music, loud music. And my husband's a musician, so I have to tell him constantly turn down the volume. Crowd sizes, I can't be around a lot of people feeling like what is it, claustrophobic around that. I tend to do better. I'm more of a melancholic type of person now, where I used to be more extroverted. So, a lot of things change with that, and definitely sensitive to people's energies, Dave, on a whole new scale. I mean, I can pick up people's emotions and energies very quickly. And if they're negative or toxic or dark, I have to go, whoops, and I have to keep my energy really clear. I take a lot of jump in the water a lot to clean my energy, sage, all those kind of things, because I'm super sensitive and I will pick up your emotions if you're not feeling them and own them. So I have to really watch that.
I actually have 2 questions around this topic. So you said that when you were in the moments that it was like a pause in the air and that you knew that you were going to die when you hit the ground. Not many people have gone through an experience like that. The level of adrenaline that must be running through you in that moment is got to be astronomical. My question around that is, after being in a position like that, do you how do you handle a fearful situation moving forward? Are you less afraid of other things because you've been in such an extreme situation like that?
I would say yes to answer your question. But here's the thing about fear. Um, Fear is a very, very low vibration. And usually with fear, we have a lot of worry. And when your body is filled with fear and worry, spirit cannot get through that density of fear and worry. So that is why you have to start unpacking and um, really confronting irrational fears. And most of our fears are irrational. And the thing is, when you're always in fear, you're never going to have clarity, because fear is coming from that part of your brain that is called the amygdala, where you're in fight, flight, freeze. And so, what you want to do is get yourself in, and that's the sympathetic part of your brain. You want to get into the parasympathetic, which is this prefrontal cortex where your executive functioning and reasoning takes place. From this place, you can make clear decisions. You have clarity. But if you're back here all the time, scared that this is going to happen or that's going to happen, there's no way you're going to make decisions that are for your highest and greatest good. So you've got to learn to turn this part off and turn this part on. And you can do it through breathing and grounding and all these ways. But the biggest area is to start looking at your belief systems that are actually lies. They're not truths. And you've believed them because your parents passed them down to you, or the officials have passed them down to you, or religious figures have passed them down to you, but they're not yours. And you have to start going, wait a minute, maybe it worked for them. And maybe it worked for me up until now, but it's not working anymore. And it's sabotaging my life. So you're going to have to start awakening to who you really are and quit just being someone who's just, okay, because you said to believe this, I'm going to believe it. And that's how I have had to reconceptualize almost every area of my life, starting with the concept of God, because I was raised Southern Baptist and Lutheran, and I was raised with a God who was dual. It was a he, and he was loving, and he was caring, and he was protective. But then there were these set of rules. And not only the Ten Commandments, but every other denomination had added their own set of rules. The Baptists have theirs, the Catholics have theirs, the Lutheran has theirs. So it's a lot of rules. And if you break those rules, you're, quote, a bad person, you're a sinner, you're going to go to hell, be eternally separated, all these things that induce fear. So as a little kid, if you grow up in these organizations, you're in this fight, flight, fear cycle all the time. And it is not serving you, your body, your mental health, your physical health, any part of you to always be in fear. So it's really important to start looking at how you were raised and these belief systems that you were given and start questioning them. And that is awakening to who you are.
Do you see religion as more of like a stepping stone for people potentially, or, kind of like the crabs in the bucket, maybe pulling you back down away from, the truth or whatever it might be?
I would say overall, religion are the crabs in the bucket, because most religions are about fear. They're teaching you to fear this entity called God. And if they're teaching you fear, you're going to be in a low vibration. You're not going to have clarity. You're not going to be able to be authentic. You're going to be in fear that and full of shame that you've done something wrong, and you're going to be judged about it. And that is how they keep control over you, if they can keep you in fear. And what I have learned going to the other side was those concepts I was raised with were not the truth. God, in my opinion, and my concept is still evolving, and I encourage everybody to figure out their own concept. I'm not telling you this is the way it is. I'm giving you an alternative perspective here. But for me, God is not a vending machine. That's how I was raised. If you put in the right behaviors, punch the button, prayed the right prayer, prayed it in the right position, put your hands together, bow your head, get on your knees at your bedside. There was even a prayer position. I mean, you think about that. And then if it didn't come true, Dave, it was on you. Were you in the prayer position, And that's just all bullshit. It really is. And it's always designed to put the problem back on you. Okay, you didn't do something right. That's why God didn't come through. Well, this has been my experience. God is not a he, it's not a person, it's not personified. God is, from my experience, this intelligence, this creative force, this energy that has no beginning and no end. And it is just full of love, that experience that I was talking about white light and embracing that. And it is not causing wars in the Ukraine and Russia. It's not causing bad things to happen to you. That is all man-made ideals. In fact, if you go back and look at the 1600s, the definition of fear was awe and reverence. It didn't mean being afraid. That word has been translated to mean that over the centuries, but that's not the original meaning of it. And almost every NDE that you hear their story, they are in awe and reverence of this presence that they're in, that is pure light and love. And when you get that, it is like mind blowing. And some people get it through psychedelics, some people get it through meditation, some people have to go to the other side and get it like me. But I do want to read in my book, You Are Deathless. There is a part that I work with kids as well when I do NET. And I had a woman come to me with her 6-year-old girl who was wetting to bed, and she was in a fundamentalist church. And she said she was adopted. And she said to me, "Do you think you could help my little girl?" And I said, "Sure." So I said, "How do you see God?" And she eagerly told me, and I quote, "God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons in all different colors, no head, and can talk." So that's how she sees God as a 6-year-old. So clearly, this little girl is still having a direct experience with God. And that really inspired me. And like I said, your own experience of God will probably look nothing like hers or mine. But I hope my story will give you encouragement to continue on your path, whether you are just new to trying to explore what your concept of something greater than yourself, God, source, higher power, whatever you want to call it is. But none of us are going to reach the end in terms of fully knowing that.
Do you think that there's, some people claim to remember past lives and, it's evidently, they say that they've proven that they've had past lives and stuff. What is your take on this? I mean, do you think, a younger person has more of an attachment to the other side because their brain hasn't been like bombarded with, a whole bunch of information, like covering it up? What's your opinion on past lives? Do we live again?
Absolutely. Our soul is constantly evolving. And I would have, had I not had this experience, I probably would have said no to that because the way I was raised and the churches I was raised in did not believe in reincarnation or past lives. But I do know now that I've been to the other side, our soul keeps evolving. We are here, we come in with a lesson to learn. And if you don't learn it, you will have to come in again and it will have to replay out in another way for you to get this lesson. And you agree before you come here to get the lesson, but sometimes the circumstances and the experience of earth is so hard for some people, they choose not to stay here long enough to get it, or they just can't get it. They just can't. They're locked into such a belief system or a narrow vision of what they're supposed to be doing on this planet that they can't break out of it. So, what I do know is we are all evolving, and every time that we choose to come back in, we're evolving at a higher level. So, all the souls on this planet right now are not at the same soul evolutionary point. Some of us may be at a higher evolution than someone else. So, when you see a baby and somebody says that's an old soul, you can look at it. It has this mature face in it as a baby, where others are just the Gerber baby. You're like, oh boy, this is the first time I've come to Earth. This is gonna be great. So you can always tell. I mean, we come up with these things for a reason. So this is somebody an old soul who's been around, who's worked on these issues, and they're coming back and again to learn yet another lesson. So that is how we learn, is on this planet Earth. And once you've learned the lesson, you go on to another lesson, or you go on to another planted or wherever else you are called. But we are not the only the beings here. There are people can come from other planets and decide to incarnate into Earth because they're at a higher vibration on their planet. They respect each other more over there. They don't have war. They don't want to kill each other because they're a different color or a different sex. So all these polarities that we're experiencing on this planet right now that are causing fear and divisiveness and hurt and pain, and they're not pulling together for the greater good of all people and the planet and sentient beings. They come here and they're just like, how can people be like this? Because where they're coming from, it's a whole totally different vibration and it's more of love. So they're incarnating to help build the light up. They're light workers coming in, and it's slowly changing, slowly, but the darkness is, and these systems are crumbling away, and it is revealing more of this unity and this oneness, which is where we all are on the other side, is love and oneness. So yes, we do have past lives, and that may be belief systems that are also operating in your current life is a past life issue that you never addressed or that you never experienced.
I'm gonna go back a little bit here if you don't mind, okay?
No, of
So
course.
so when you're in that moment, to go back a little bit, you have this pause in the air. You have kind of like the realization of the inevitability that you're, probably going to die in that moment. Um, Do you think there's an aspect you mentioned that your soul leaves before the moment of impact? And I've actually heard this before, similar situations. They say, right before I hit the wall, that they just popped right up out of their body. Do you think there's an aspect where your soul or your consciousness knows when it's time to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And the thing is I've never remembered that pain of impact ever. Now I remember waking up that morning in the ICU and I remembered the pain of the physical pain of healing and the mental pain of the anxiety and depression and all that I've been going through 40 years since, but I have never to this day remembered that. And your body does that as a safety mechanism, and that's why I tell people, like, honestly, Dave, I was resurrected. Okay. We hear in the Bible, Jesus was resurrected from the dead, Lazarus. Well, there's people with NDEs that are resurrected. They truly came back from death. They didn't have a near death. They came back from death. And so when you realize that you are completely gone, okay, you have no control over anything, that something supernatural has come in and taken you somewhere, and then it puts your soul, that life force, back in you so your heart can start beating. You have It's like, this is all beyond me. This is something way out there, supernatural is what I call it. This consciousness, this energy that is somehow coming through me. And that is when I really realized the feeling of like powerlessness that you have in this life. A lot of times, when things happen, and people ask me, why do bad things happen to good people? And I asked when I was 19 years old because I was a good girl. I'd done everything I was told up to that point. And it really gets down to, we live in a country that has free will. We get to make choices every day, and your choice impacts me and my choice impacts you. And that's one of the lessons that we need to learn, is everyone and everything is connected. We are all energy and we're all connected. So when people are making terrible choices like choosing to get in the car when they're drunk and to drive, they are putting other people at harm, including themselves. So, that's the explanation for that. It's not, oh, God's gonna target you and say, you screwed up here, so therefore this is gonna happen to you, and you're blamed and shamed. In fact, that's one thing that I'm delighted to share with your audience, is there's no judgment on the other side. Now, for a lot of people who grew up in a religious organization, we were taught that we would be judged when we got to the other side, kind of like Santa Claus. God is keeping a list. And that's like, that's BS as well. Because here's the deal: the terms bad and good, okay, those are earth terms. We, man, created them in order to evaluate ourselves and other people. They do not exist on the other side. Those terms do not exist. So if you don't have anything bad to compare, if you're not comparing bad to good, there's nothing to judge. It's just your story and what happened in your life, all the mistakes that you have to have in order to learn. Mistakes are part of learning. So that's really important to understand. You're not going to go over there and be judged. You will have a life review, but quit shooting yourself and blaming yourself and criticizing and guilting yourself now, because that's not going to happen on the other side. And that's only keeping you down and keeping you from being the person who you were born to be, which is brilliant, radiant, uh, eternal, glorious, perfect.
There seems to be a lot to that as well. If you're too worried about judgment, whether from other people or from God, especially from God, right? Because no one wants to burn in hell, right? They give you like the most sick and twisted like idea of what's going to happen to you if you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like it's crazy. And so it makes me wonder, like, how much things are people not like willing to do that they want to do, just in terms like, what I'm saying, right? Do you think it limits what people can do and
Absolutely.
experience in this life?
Absolutely, because when you're in fear, you're not going to take risks that are appropriate. risk within a certain realm. Okay, appropriate risk. You're going to live in fear. So you're going to go, oh, I'm not going to do that because this may happen or that may happen. So yeah, if you fear death, you're not going to truly live.
The person that you were in the car with that night, um, just out of curiosity, have you ever seen this person or spoken with this person since
Yes.
after?
Yes, I have. I saw him the following year. He did get to graduate from the Air Force Academy. Um, Unfortunately, or here's the deal. His dad was a three-star general in and he headed the Army Corps of Engineer at the Pentagon when this happened. So any other cadet would have been kicked out because the state of Colorado charged him with vehicular assault, DUI, and other things. And he did plead guilty to those. And any other cadet based on our honor code at the Air Force Academy would have been kicked out. But because his dad was such a high level influential Army officer, he was able to make a call to the superintendent of the Air Force Academy and say, hey, you give my son whatever punishment he needs from the Air Force, but he's going to stay in and he's going to graduate. And he did. And so I have, from that experience, I have this sense of justice that needs to be done in the world. I feel like he never forgave me. And when he saw me that next year, I was walking. They didn't think I would walk again. And he said to me, oh, I guess you're walking again, so you're okay. And I just was so angry at him for so long, day, because I didn't get what I thought I deserved, which was a heartfelt apology from him. And I had to realize he's an alcoholic, he's an addict. And, I did go through therapy later in life when the crash happened. And after 4 months of being in the hospital, the doctor told my mother, Nicole needs to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Her mental health is really critical right now. And my mother said back to the doctor, Jesus is our psychiatrist. She's going to be just fine. And I want your audience to know when someone says that, Jesus never came down. I love Jesus. Okay. Jesus is a way shower to me, but he never came down and sat on the sofa and said, let's talk about your trauma. And as a result of not dealing with the mental issues that I went through, the horrific trauma that I went through of being in and out of death so many times, uh, I developed an eating disorder. And back in the 80s, it was called compulsive overeating. Now it's known as binge eating disorder. And a lot of people, primarily women, but men too, suffer from that. And it lasted for 20 years. And it's very secretive, it's very shaming, and it's very painful to have that. And that's why I went into nutrition and I study nutrition because like a lot of people that go into something in their field, it's because they're trying to fix themselves in a way. And I thought if I go into nutrition, I'll understand what's going on with me and I can fix myself. Well, I didn't realize it was a mental disorder. And so, it's really important that people understand that mental health is very serious. I also want to say I'm a 100% disabled veteran and that it is more than 22 veterans a day that commit suicide in our country. The data they used for that 22 a day figure actually did not include the states of California and Texas, the two biggest states. And it's really, the numbers are more like over 30 people a day. So today, the day we're filming this, 30 more veterans are going to take their life day as a result of mainly untreated mental disorders. Okay. And it's sad because in a nation as great as we're supposed to be, that we can't be helping veterans more than we are, and just people that are dealing with mental issues as a whole. We're not giving them more resources and more treatment options and help, just basically help. So that's a real what do I say, heart pulse point for me, and something that I advocate for not only veterans, for people but with mental health. And I also want to tell people there's physical wounds that we endure, there's mental wounds, and there's soul wounds. Okay, and I didn't ever know about the soul wound part until 2019 when I actually went to see a shaman, and he was able to tell me how my soul fractured during the crash and that I still had all these soul parts out of me. I wasn't aligned with my body, soul, mind, and spirit. And so that part being out was constantly kicking in disassociation for me. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be grounded. I didn't want to own what was going on. So if you're having issues in that soul arena, soul loss is a real thing. Soul fragmentation, you can Google it, and there's many ways to deal with that. You can use a shaman. You can use if a mental health counselor is um, schooled in that awareness of that and treatment of that, they can help you. You can do it yourself if you know what you're doing. You can try psychedelics. There's different ways to integrate and call these pieces back. But I really want people to understand that the big three symptoms, if you have soul loss, are first of all, and I'm going to have to get my notes from this. Okay. The feeling of you don't want to be here. So if any of you out there are feeling like you don't want to be here, and that's what I didn't want to be here when I came back. I knew there was going to be all this pain and suffering, especially with my body and getting dependent on my parents again. Because here I was at 19, I was back to infancy. I couldn't even go to the bathroom. I couldn't walk. I had such massive injuries, totally dependent on them, put right back into being an infant again. So the second one is a low level consistent feeling that something is missing. And this is interesting because a lot of compulsive behaviors and addictions actually fall into this statement, because you are feeling so empty and lost, and you're looking for something in these substances to fill that void. And um, depression falls in there as well. And then third, you can't get over it. It just keeps cycling and ruminating. And for me, I just felt stuck with these chronic health conditions that I had, and I was hyper vigilant about keeping myself safe. I tried to put these rules around my life so something like this would never happen again. I always wanted to be the driver, these control issues. But as I now know, control really is an illusion. There's only so much that we really can control. So just like any other wound, I want to say that that wounded part of the soul should at some point undergo healing. And that it's very powerful work. And we're dealing with that very real but hidden spiritual realm. And I'm here to tell you that if you've tried everything else, try this.
That seems to be a very, very important to you, and I do respect your like genuine intentions as far as, you want to change the narrative around death and this type of stuff. I think the intention behind that is very good. And I think that, you could help a lot of people with what you're doing. So, I suppose my question naturally now is, what else is important to Nicole? Who is Nicole as a person? What do you like to do? What do you like birds? What do you do on the weekends type thing?
Oh, I love my doggies. I have two Pekingese that we adopted, me and my husband, 3 years ago. And one is handicapped. And I tell you, that little handicapped guy, when I'm having a bad day, I look at him and um, I just go, okay, he's always smiling. And so I love my doggies. I love the town we moved to. It's a smaller town. I've been in Hawaii for 17 years, and my husband and I, he retired. We moved to a coastal town, New Bern, so we get to enjoy both the beach and the mountains pretty close by. So when I'm feeling good, I love to hike. I love to be in anything in nature. I love being outdoors. I love to bring people together and have entertain with maybe 6 people or so. I don't need big parties anymore, but I want enough people to have a conversation and to have a higher level conversation, not just talk about who's scoring, what football team's winning or whatever, but really deeper conversations. And what else? I love to have fun. Fun is important for all of us. So finding ways, even when you're still dealing with chronic disabilities, to have fun. Travel, as my health allows me. I love to experience new places. For our 20th anniversary, my husband and I are going to go to Budapest and take a cruise up to Amsterdam. So that's going to happen in the fall, and I'm excited to see those locations. I've read about them. So I think when you get out in the world and you experience, especially countries that are poorer than the United States, you come back very grateful. Your gratitude just expands even more, of how grateful we are in this country to have all the luxuries that we do, including air condition. It's not a given when you go to Europe or any of these countries that you're going to have central air. That is just, it's a luxury. So appreciating the small things, a sunrise, a sunset, and I just the experience of life, finding to be something to be grateful for in every moment of a day, even though it may not all be the way you hope it would be.
If you could ask one question to the person watching this video right now, or even if you could ask one question to a complete stranger at random, anything you want, what would you ask them?
Do you love yourself?
That's a pretty good question. I would hope the answer is yes if you're watching.
Yeah, but I mean, really love. You're not using the word, I should have done this, I should have done that. Should is a shame-based word. So if you're using, I should have done this, take that out of your vocabulary, okay? Because it just weakens you. Loving yourself is a process, it's a journey. But on the other side, the main themes are love and oneness. We are love and we are oneness.
How much importance should we put on the past?
Well, if you're getting triggered a lot emotionally, this is a lot of the work that I had to do as well, is to embody my emotions because I was stuck in past trauma or past situations where I didn't process the emotions and they get stuck in our body and we are not able to move forward. We sabotage ourselves because we react like we were at 17 years old or 6 years old, and so it's important in terms of moving forward to deal with events and trauma in the past. You have to heal those trauma wounds. So that's important in order to move forward. But here's where I want people to really understand how important it is to be in the present because we never know when our last day on earth is going to be. I mean, I certainly didn't think I was going to die at 19. And if we actually lived with that awareness and presence, we would be more present, loving, kind, uh, and more respectful of one another, of Mother Earth and how we treat her. Did you litter? Did you put your cigarette butt on the ground? I mean, do I really need to do that to Mother Earth? Um, the pollution, the toxicity, all of that, and our sentient beings, all these little fur babies that we have and feathered friends and all the living creatures, including our trees and everything in this world, all sentient beings. It's important to respect all of this because we are all in this together. So when you talk to someone, be present with them because you may never see them again. And that is probably the most important thing in terms of being in the present that I can share because you can plan for the future, but things like the coronavirus that just wiped out a lot of people's plans for the future, right? Weddings, funeral, all of that. So things like that can happen at any moment, at any time. Those are things beyond our control. So be in the present with the person that you're with at that moment.
You're making me think of one more question. I was gonna say, so like I like what you said about the importance of living knowing that you could die today or tomorrow, whatever the quote was. That's very much how I live my life, just as a result of the near-death experience. And I could only speak for myself, but I mean, what better of a motivator could you possibly have, man? If you're not doing it today, like you might not have tomorrow.
That's
And so
right.
I tend to agree with all the things you say about that as well. I suppose that wasn't a question. I was just chiming in.
You're validating me.
All good things must come to an end. So before we do that, do you mind telling the people where they could find you, your book, and your work and everything?
Absolutely. Well, the name of my book is You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. And if you can see my credentials up there, do you see BTDT? Do you know what that stands for?
I do not.
Been there, done that. So what I tell people is for a near-death experience, there is no school to go to get this experience, okay? This is actually experiential, and I don't want anybody to have to die to get the lessons that I learned. That's why I'm sharing these lessons with you guys. But that's something, if you've experienced something, put it on your resume, because that is a powerful credential to have, is when you've actually had something and been there and done it. Same thing with an eating disorder. I have a whole different level of empathy with people that have suffered through eating disorders, because I've been there and done it, and I can relate to it. So that is my credential for that. But you can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Barnes and Noble. I'm on Kindle, and I am on Audible. I actually narrated my book myself, and that was a whole nother layer of healing. When you tell your story, and I encourage anybody that's had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience to tell their story. When you tell the story, something in your brain changes, and you're able to help heal PTSD, depression, anxiety, some of these symptoms when you voice it, that it happened. And then listen to yourself. Go back, if you're ever on a podcast like I am with you, Dave, go back and listen to yourself tell your story, because that imprints it in your body in a whole nother way. It embodies it. And then you can find me on my website, www.nicolekerr.com. And I will tell you, if you select my book as a book club, for your book club to read, I will try, depending on where you are in the world, I will try to zoom in on it for 30 minutes and take any questions from your book club group. I just did one last week, and it was phenomenal. It was just, we had such a great time. So it's something I offer free of service. I try to keep the prices really low on this book so that people can get it. And if you live in North Carolina, you can get it free at the library. It's in the library system. And I got one thing to show you. You may have to cut this. Let me go get him. Hang on. Everybody, this is Bo. He's my little handicap Pekingese, and his name is Beaux. Okay, so the French pronunciation. Oh, look at everybody, say hi. And I want everybody to know that their deceased pets are going to be waiting for you on the other side. Pets go to the other side. So these wonderful creatures that bring so much joy into our lives, of course, they're going to be there on the other side. So I just wanted to share that.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much for sharing your puppy with us. He's cute.
Oh, Bella doesn't want to come. She's the other one, his sister, but he will be. He is just so mellow.
I love dogs as well. It's like, yeah, I got a soft spot for the animals.
Yeah, well, they're the only, they give us unconditional love when sometimes people in our lives can't or won't. So for some people, it's the only unconditional love they'll have their entire life.
Very true. And, speaking of animals, I don't know how you set me up so well for this question, but I was sitting here realizing, how on earth did I overlook the fact that what is that behind you? You have a horse being rode by a person.
Yeah, that's my husband's statue. And oh, there you go, a Native American coming down a mountain.
That's so cool. I was sitting there, I'm like, how did I was so focused on what you were saying that I didn't even notice it behind you this whole
Well,
time.
this is not my usual setup. I'm usually in my office. So we've got the paddle up there from Hawaii. We're all rowing in the same direction, kind of thing, to remind us about that. But also just indigenous cultures. We are very much, we collect art from them, and we appreciate them, and we try to study them and meet people of different indigenous
Yeah,
background.
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, it's always nice talking to just different people from outside of your neighborhood and your culture. It's really interesting seeing the difference there, to say, wow, we, like you were saying before, we're used to our air conditioning and this type of stuff. People are so lazy. Look, I'm a little lazy too, but it's like, you got people traveling miles to get water, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
That's
stuff
right.
like that. So
Yeah.
I respect it. I think that's cool. So listen, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. It was so nice to meet you, and I appreciate what you're doing. Yeah.
I
Keep it
try
up.
my I try my best. It really means a lot to me. So I appreciate your time, and this whole thing's been an absolute trip, really. I enjoy every individual conversation. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And with that being said, I suppose that's a wrap. So to everyone, Thank you everyone for your sliver of time. This has been ours. Nicole, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so nice meeting you and of course your dog as well. And yeah, I guess that's a wrap. So to everyone at home, peace out. So do you wear contacts now or like I noticed all your other interviews
Uh-huh.
you had the blue glasses. It's like my favorite color. And then so
Oh,
I noticed you only used them for reading this time.
yeah, this is the first time I've done a podcast where I haven't used my glasses. And that's because my husband was telling me when I see your podcast, your glasses have those circular rings from um the glare, I guess, with the lights or whatever. So he said, try to do a podcast without your glasses. So you're the first one I'm doing it with.
Oh,
It
nice.
makes me better. I can see you better if I put them back on.
I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of questions that, it happens every interview. Like I'll research someone for like 10 hours or something. And every time the interview ends, like an hour later, I'm like, I could have asked him this and that. Thank you everyone for your time. This has been, wait, what the hell? Thank, thank, oh my God. You see what I'm saying with the intro and outro? Because I feel like it's a script. It's ridiculous. Okay.